Ladies, gentlemen, and haradrim of all ages, a couple of days ago we had the stream from the developers for Diablo 4's upcoming PTR, which is previewing most, if not all, of what Season 7 will be once it comes into the game in early January next year. We talked about this stream after it happened, but a couple of hours afterwards, a blog post was released that also had much more detailed information on some of the topics that were covered, along with some more new reveals too. And on top of that, with it being a couple of days now, we've had time for a large chunk of the player base to see and react to the changes in the stream and form their own opinions. So today I want to talk about this new information from the blog post and then just the thoughts I've seen from the community about the changes as a whole. First things first, then we got quite a bit of extra new detail about the Witchcraft Powers, specifically a lot of further examples of these powers, possibly even just all of the ones being added to the game. I'll just sort of be scrolling through these and highlighting the cooler ones that I see, with the note that through the system you can have 5 regular powers and 1 unique power equipped at the same time, which are the stronger, more notable ones, though there is no distinction here in the actual blog post of which ones are considered unique by the game, so keep that in mind when considering synergies. Abyssal Resonance seems massive for builds that spend a lot of resource, specifically things like Rod of Kapaleke Spiritborn. Even after the nerfs to that item, this will probably synergize extremely well with that. Wave of Woe is quite interesting as a way to turn single target damage into AoE, but still keep its use against single targets too. Shaken Soul gives you a way to apply Vulnerable relatively consistently without worrying about your skills or other methods of applying that debuff, which is always great to see. It adds some freedom to builds. And then in the Psyche powers, Lifelink is relatively niche but very cool conceptually. It could make sense with a Thorn style build, or in higher pit tiers I could see this doing some work based on how it reads. Twilight Warding could have quite a strong effect further depending on how it actually works. In my mind, if you get this effect while having barrier from any source with this active, it would hopefully stay active as long as you have the barrier, and then if the projectile reflect scales off of your own player damage multipliers or stuff like that, that could get quite funky too. As for Growth and Decay, Soul Harvest directly increases player main stat, which is a pure damage increase for most builds. Hex of Whispers is a method of fortified generation for classes that normally wouldn't really get that. Grow seems like it will be fantastic for minion or companion focused builds like for Druid or Necromancer. Then we have the Lost Powers. Breath of the Coven increases your attack speed and lucky hit chance at higher ranks too. Hex Specialization can give you extra crit chance. Aura Specialization gives you extra crit damage multiplier, so for the most part these are generally just strong power boosts. And then of course there is also Piranado, which we saw on the stream, and I desperately hope this one's going to be strong enough to be meta because it's both awesome and hilarious. The next new thing then in this blog post is Root Holds. These are a brand new seasonal sort of mini dungeon based around the head rotten enemies. They are opened up using a new type of sigil that comes from the Whispers of the Dead caches and silent chests, and they are just an alternate way of getting the reward resources for the seasonal power and interacting with the head rotten enemies. We also then got a follow-up on the occult gems, which I mentioned earlier, with the majority, if not all of them, also listed for their effects, so again I will show them all on the screen, but I'll just be highlighting the ones that seem important to me on voice at first glance. There are a trio that increase witchcraft potency of the different kinds. There is Phantom String, which sounds incredible for overpower builds. Witching Hour makes core skills occasionally gain the Eldritch tag, which actually has a fair amount of sort of potential implications from the rest of these boosts too, so that could be quite fun. Voice of the Stars boosts ultimate skills, and ultimate skill builds are an intended focus of Season 7, with some of the other changes being made as well that we saw on the stream. Mind Wreath fully affects cooldown reduction. Vulture Talon essentially makes damage over time builds burstier, reducing the timer on damage over time effects while maintaining damage of the effect as a whole, which is quite interesting. Vile Phylactery is essentially a long cooldown cheat death effect, which is neat to see. Friend of the Bog is super strong in theory, bonus primary stat, bonus maximum life, and permanent unhindered is pretty great as a concept. Moonlight Ward is sort of scary good as well, considering some of these witchcraft powers have listed effects at rank 10. I would assume that rank 10 is at least the possible maximum, if not the actual proper maximum, which would then make this be 30% damage reduction and 10% bonus maximum all element resist, which is quite a defensive boost from a single jewelry slot. Overall, these are pretty cool and quite high potential for genuine impact on the game, especially if you consider that they will combine, of course, with the witchcraft system too to begin with. We then got some new items announced for each of the classes as well, past the ones that we saw on the stream too. A new unique chest piece for Barbarian that is fully based around Hammer of the Ancients and Earthquake mixing together, making Hammer of the Ancients strike in a line, which is neat in the first place, but also making it explode earthquakes that it passes through to explode them for their total damage that it would have dealt over time. This totally changes how earthquakes function as a sub-power for the class. It's really cool, honestly. I love the way that this works. Druid has a new unique amulet, Malefic Crescent, and this is worded pretty weirdly in a way that makes me think that there will be further changes to Lupine Ferocity as a key passive and reworks that they haven't told us about yet, because it repeatedly mentions a consecutive crit bonus, which is not a thing with Lupine Ferocity right now, but this clearly is a pure werewolf unique is the intention, so hopefully this works well to actually make people play more of that playstyle. Then there's also a new legendary aspect for Druid 2, Electrified Claws, which makes shapeshifting into a different animal form cause a lightning bolt to strike, and increase all lightning bolt damage that you do for 2 seconds afterwards. So this is working towards a properly viable pure lightning bolt subpower build. Then we have Necromancer with 2 new legendary aspects. Distilled Anima makes it so when Soul Rift is active you are unhindered, just permanently while this effect is going, and you gain bonus movement speed, and then also Bone Duster, which makes Bone Spear guaranteed crit on enemies within your bone prison, and also deal increased damage in general. This seems to me like a perfect match and synergy with the Indira's Memory unique that we saw on the stream, which makes Bloodwave create bone prisons and also affect your bone spears too, so there's some really good synergy within that. After that we have a couple of new rogue legendary aspects. Slice and Dice makes Twisting Blades have a cleave effect when putting the blades into enemies, and makes the blades return up to 45% faster as well. Then Bitter Infection makes enemies infected by Shadow Imbuement take its damage as dot effect, and also increases Shadow Imbuement damage as a whole in general, which is quite a neat Shadow Imbuement boosting concept. Sorcerer has a new legendary aspect called Mind's Awakening, and this makes Pyromancy skills immobilize enemies, Shock skills give you movement speed, and Frost skills give you barrier generation, and while enlightened you get all 3 buffs from any of these 3 skill types, which is honestly sort of neat. The main question I have is if the barrier has a cap on its maximum it can give you, because if not, I could see this getting really quite good for generating barrier as a sorcerer. Then for Spiritborn we have a new unique quarterstaff, Sustained War Crozier, which I probably pronounced incorrectly, but it's very cool honestly. It makes focus skills benefit from all upgrades they could have. Presumably this means the enhancement, so you can just take things like base toxic skin and it will still both increase your thorns damage and give you explosions on crits, which is pretty cool. But then also it makes potency skills gain stacking increased damage buffs every time that you use a focus skill, up to a 200% maximum bonus to damage at the full effect. So this could very easily make potentially multiple new builds worth using, where you spam out your focus skills to boost the damage of things like Payback, Razor Wings, Rushing Claw, or Touch of Death, and that will definitely be a very neat new setup, at least in my opinion. That's everything new then, so for a brief stop on the actual community and player base response. It's generally very positive to this season. The return of seasonal powers, the fact that it is both witchcraft and occult gems, is more than I could have asked for, and I did ask for seasonal powers to come back quite recently, and they're looking great now that we have them in again, at least as far as I'm concerned. The new activities aren't crazy, at least seemingly, but the seasonal powers will hopefully change up the gameplay of everything else in the game for the whole season anyways. As far as class changes, Barbarians seem interested in the new Earthquake style builds, but still desire buffs to base important skills, like just Whirlwind is a big example that could use a bit more power on its own. Druid seems interested to mess around with the new Hurricane Wolf Companion legendary, but not too much else was really exciting from these changes. Necromancer has a lot of potential between the 2 new Bloodwave uniques, each possibly making a new fun build, or at least a variation of Bloodwave. Rogue has some exciting new things going on with making Shadow Imbuement more viable in general, and possibly a proper Shadow Step build too, which seems like a lot of potential fun. And then Sorcerer has a lot of Ball Lightning coming up, but a lot of Sorcs still seem a little bit unhappy with the general balance changes being made outside of this. There hasn't been enough, but of course we won't even know what all the balance changes are going to be until we see the full patch notes, so I would hold off from making any permanent decisions on your thoughts quite yet. And then for Spiritborn, the new items and aspects are quite fun to me. It opens up builds to new styles because it has been locked quite hard for Spiritborn on what's good up to this point. As for the rest of it, we get proper patch notes next week, so again we will see the deeper proper balance changes there. This is mostly just limited to the actual new additions more than it is anything else. The other main thing that I've seen players talking loads about then is the Armory feature finally coming. This is a godsend. It will be fantastic for the game, especially considering I know that there were people who were so against switching builds in the current system, they would even make a whole second character of the same class to just have a different build to play with rather than having to switch back and forth on the same character, which to me is just a crazy amount of actual investment. So the Armory feature is a massive deal for those players, if for no one else, and trust me, it's a massive deal for me too, and I didn't do that. If you sit down and think about it too hard, yes, of course, it is sort of ridiculous that it took them nearly a year and a half from the base launch of the game to work in an Armory feature, especially when it was just a thing at launch of Diablo 3, and the fact that this was taken so long to become a part of Diablo 4, and that is something worth discussing and talking about, sure, why that is the case. But For the most part, I and most of the people seem happy enough that this is finally coming now to begin with, and I'm good with that. That just about does it for today then, everyone. A roundup of all the new information about Season 7 that we learned after the developer stream happened a couple of days ago, along with the community reactions to all these major changes as well. I hope you've enjoyed this, and as usual, feel free to leave your own thoughts on all of it down in the comment section below. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, stay sweet.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.